You don't have to be afraid. This child is his way.
Hello there, welcome to the channel, hope you all are staying entertained, and speaking of which, the trailer recently dropped for the First Omen, which is a prequel to the original that was released way back in 1976. Honestly, I knew this movie was arriving at some point this year, but I didn't realise it was to be April the 5th, so we are close. And if we are sticking with being honest, then I will happily admit that I haven't really had this film on my radar for a few different reasons, especially since the release of The Exorcist Believer, which was yet another insult to a beloved horror classic, tarnished once more by another attempt to recreate the same magic as the first, but failing miserably at being both intellectually stimulating as well as scaring modern audiences. But the trend of sequels, prequels and remakes will of course continue, especially when it comes to the masterpiece cinema we adored growing up. It's been almost 50 years since the first Omen, or should I say the original Omen, as this new instalment takes that name.
You don't have to be afraid. This child is his way.
This is because we finally get to witness the birth of that evil little shit Damien and all the events that transpired in the build-up to the very secret yet very dark ceremony in Rome which sought to bring a most powerful evil into this world. At the very most, I was mildly intrigued until I watched the trailer. So as a huge fan of horror, it immediately felt like a weight off. I was impressed by the trailer itself, the way it was edited with its very sinister shots of one lady in particular in some extremely uncomfortable situations, as well as the glimpses of cult members we see skulking around who are inevitably involved in this unholy event. It all looked very foreboding without giving any major details away, and we don't like spoilers in trailers, do we? I was also relieved to see some great actors involved, such as Bill Nighy, Ralph Ineson and Charles Dance. So then one would have to wonder how good was the script that it prompted all these fine actors to want to be in the film in the first place. I'm curious and I'm interested now. The very first thing, however, that did catch my attention and was a pleasant surprise to hear was the soundtrack from the Vikings TV show, named If I Had a Heart. You see, you advertise one thing and now I want to go binge watch the whole Vikings series all over again for the 4th time. Not the mediocre Netflix version, but the good stuff with Ragnar, you know. Another observation that you are all probably aware of, but for some weird reason I never noticed until about halfway through, was that the whole trailer appears to be in reverse. I'm not sure if I've ever seen that done in a film promotion before, but it is eerily effective in this one. It's also kind of symbolic when you think about the fact that we are going back to the beginning, a part of the story that has never been explored before in any of the previous films, as well as the 2006 Omen series that got cancelled after one season. I'm speaking of course about the birth of the Antichrist, the son of the devil himself, Damien. The other thing it may well be a nod towards, but certainly reminds me a lot of, was when a few rock bands in the 80s onwards were actually accused of infusing their music with satanic messages that you could only hear when listening to their songs backwards. I'm sorry, but how did people honestly believe in all that rubbish in a court of law? And then on the other hand you have O.J. Simpson walking away from 2 counts of murder. Come on guys. So for anyone else interested in this exciting new horror entry, let's quickly go over what we know so far from the synopsis, what moments stand out in the trailer as impressive, and also why I think this film could have value to the legacy of the franchise and may truly be scary. The synopsis simply reads, a young American woman played by Nell Tiger Free who travels to Rome to dedicate her life to the church as a nun. However, once she arrives, she begins to uncover a dark conspiracy that plans to bring about the birth of the Antichrist. So it's a very basic description, sure, but it's also very vague, which I like. I do have to laugh a little bit, as you can tell this movie is set in the 70s, because how many women today would find moving to Rome and giving up the rest of their years in service to the church appealing? Probably not that many, and nor would I blame you. But there are a few things to unpack here that relate heavily to the original film, made even more so by the fact that it will take place maybe just a year before The Omen, as Damien was adopted while still a baby. If I remember correctly, the couple that adopted Damien did so because their newborn had died, but to spare his wife this devastating news, the husband had made a deal with Father Brennan to adopt Damien after being told his mother had died at childbirth. In doing so, Catherine Thorne would never suspect that her child was in fact not hers. It was Father Brennan and also Father Spiletto from the first film who were two of the leaders of this hidden cult that sought to bring Damien into this world and achieved in doing so. We know they will be making an appearance again in the prequel film to shed some light as to how they were able to perform such an unholy ritual. Father Brennan will be played by Ralph Ineson, who most I'm sure will know him from The Witch. He's an incredible actor with one of the deepest voices I've ever heard, but I think he will do incredible justice to the character of Brennan, who helped organise the dark ritual of Damien's birth, as well as conspiring against the Catholic Church and possibly even the Vatican to keep it a secret. Bill Nighy looks to be playing a figure of authority within the church, so I would have to assume for now that he may be on the good side. If you can assume the Catholic Church is mostly on the good side, of course. That's a matter of opinion. I mean, they did keep moving all those priests around, didn't they? You know why. Charles Dance is playing Father Harris, but we don't know if he is part of the cult or not, and nor is he in the trailer as far as I can see. Nell Tiger-Free, who was in Game of Thrones and a series called Servant, is playing the lead as the American who travels to Rome and I guess becomes entangled in this dark plot to bring evil into this world. I suppose my biggest question is, well, who is the mother? It looks to me like the protagonist is a completely different woman from the lady being subjected to either a false pregnancy or some kind of demonic possession. Therefore, I would have to assume that the lead character played by Nell Tiger-Free, and by the way, that's the last time I'm going to say her full name, it just sounds silly. Her character will perhaps not be the mother, but rather a willing or unwilling nun has already been chosen for the sacrifice. Then that poses another question, doesn't it? How will the Antichrist be spawned into this world? Will it be a natural birth, or be it fatal for the mother, or perhaps some form of ritual that triggers a demonic possession to take place, allowing some sort of divine conception, similar to how Jesus was conceived, but the unholy version, I guess. The trailer has a series of headers that read, "To control those who don't believe, create something to fear." This, you could argue, is pretty much the foundation of almost every religion, right? Most religions are based on God-fearing, which in history has always forced the populace to fall in line and easily be controlled, lest you suffer an eternity in hell, as the Bible says. Pretty awful in my estimation, and most of these religions certainly have a lot to answer for. That being said, whether you are religious or not, there is for all of us a very deep-rooted and subconscious connection to gods, the afterlife, and angels and demons. When they are presented in stories, maybe it was how you were raised or just popular culture. I think this is why people found films like The Exorcist and The Omen probably the scariest. It's because those horror films perverted our sense of morality, mortality, and the teachings we grew up with, whether we acknowledged and accepted it or not. Just because you don't believe in the Bible doesn't mean you don't wonder about the mysteries that science cannot explain. Therefore, when these films explore the dark side of angels and demons and what happens after we die, we become subjected to insecurities of the unknown, and when the line between storytelling and reality becomes blurred, it can be a truly frightening experience for some cinema goers. Now, the success of this film all depends on whether this film has a good script and a great director, of course, but I'm just suggesting why it could be extra scary, just based on the theme material alone. This scene here is probably the most disturbing shot in the trailer, just because it seems to me those coffins are slightly too small to be for adults. It's hard to gauge the size of the room, but if this is part of the ritual, then is this also a sacrifice to evoke the devil by burning either infants or children? It almost looks like some kind of underground catacomb, and we do see many human skulls as well as other bones that make up the design of the shrine as it burns. It's an interesting quick glimpse. In fact, the whole concept of restricting this trailer to only 1 minute is a great idea because of that. I wonder if they know they have something special and would prefer to keep plot details and certain imagery secret until release. I wish more trailers would follow this example and not spoil everything for us all the time. The trailer ends with an eyeball close-up, which always gives me the willies, because being horror, usually something is about to pierce it would normally be the case. Instead, we hear a couple of sinister voice lines. The latter audio is actually in reverse as well, and apparently is a line from the original film that says, "Look at me, Damien, it's all for you." Although I'm not too familiar with Nell's work, everybody is saying how great she was in Servant, so hopefully she'll be fantastic as the lead. Arkasha Stevenson is the director, who is best known for the Channel Zero series and Brand New Cherry Flavour, if anyone has seen those. Let me know in the comments how you feel about her previous work, because my memory of Channel Zero is a little hazy. I remember it having some spooky moments of both horror and sci-fi, but the story was a bit incoherent, maybe? Possibly I'm wrong, let me know. I'll lastly just mention it for anyone unaware. The original film had so many problems and accidents on and off set that it became highly publicised that the film was cursed. So many people involved in the film had their plane struck by lightning while on board, as well as the infamous plane crash killing everybody on board that Gregory Peck was intended to fly on, but luckily he didn't. There were also IRA bombings, which were frequent at the time, but then there were animals on set that would sometimes attack their trainers. The baboons attacking the car in that one scene was not intended, but rather they just went berserk, and in the end it made great cinema. Lastly, an assistant to the special effects designer had died in a car crash, which I can imagine had sealed the deal for many folks and cemented the idea that there must be a curse. Similar events apparently had plagued newer installments into the franchise, but I wonder if we'll start to hear of issues that arose during this new film as we get closer to the release date. So those are my thoughts for now. I'm quite looking forward to this one if I'm honest, and I hope it delves deep into the darkness of the Antichrist and all of its lore. Hopefully it has a decent mixture of suspense, scares and great storytelling. Not always easy to find in many horror films these days, but The Omen is special and needs to be treated that way. So thanks very much for watching, see you next time and stay entertained.